Hello everybody, Raven Knight here. Okay, normally I'd go into a really cool explanation on the Survivor here and even open up in a really epic way to try and add some gravitas to the whole thing, but I really can't. Yes, guys, I know I'm back a little bit early with the Dead by Daylight video. Normally I take some time between these to really get a feel for the character after reading their lore and play a few rounds with them, but I can't do it this time. Elodie Rakoto's lore is just too bland for that. I mean, did you watch my video on Felix Richter, the last Survivor I did? It's literally the same thing. It's the same thing, right down to the same lore except for one minor difference. Don't believe me? Watch this. Okay. Elodie Rakoto grew up in Paris and learned that her parents were part of a secret society that researched the occult and were sworn to protect the world from an unknown entity, and they met often at Dyer Island. There she made a few friends that called themselves the Pariahs. Felix Richter being one of them. And if you remember what happened to Felix, you know what happened next. The entity appeared in an underground ruin and Elodie's parents vanished along with all the other adults. So, like the other pariahs, she wanted to know what happened to her family, but unlike the other pariahs who eventually tried to move on with their lives, Elodie became something of a Lara Croft figure, working for a man called the Collector and using his occult knowledge and resources to research the entity and where it might be and where it might have taken her parents. Eventually, her rummaging led her to a cavern where she was ambushed by a group called the Black Veil, a cult of fanatics who dreamed of awakening and summoning the entity. She managed to escape briefly, only for her to get stabbed and then dragged off to the entity's realm. And that's about it. I mean, I'd go into more detail on a few other things, but there's so much missing from this, and the stuff we do get doesn't add up. Let me give you an example. It's established early on that Elodie's family was from Madagascar before moving to Paris. Okay, that's fine. And we also learned she grew up on the stories of Madagascar, and she even has dreams and visions of the lush jungles and beautiful visuals shared with her of that place. Even as she's near death, her thoughts drift to Madagascar and how beautiful it must be. Like, literally, as she gets stabbed, her first thoughts and visions go to Madagascar and the lush jungles and vegetations. And this implies that she has a longing to see that place, a deep connection. And that's all fine, that's good. Why doesn't she go there? I don't mean that in a mean way, I'm being honest. The Collector rewards her work by paying her, so why not at some point go there to see the land her stories and dreams told her about? I mean, especially after she loses her family. Wouldn't that be the first thing she'd want to do? Go back to her roots, explore the place of her family, like kind of see what they saw and get that connection? Now you might say, oh, but finding her parents became her obsession. Well, yeah, sure, I guess, but the lore also tells us that the Madagascar stories are what helped her find peace as a child after she lost them, so why wouldn't she want to at least see the place? And other than that one Madagascar obsession, we know nothing else about Elodie's likes, dislikes, interests, hobbies, skills, passions, nothing. Her whole lore is just wrapped around her obsessing over the loss of her parents and the entity. Which would be fine if it wasn't for the fact that it's so bland. At least Felix Richter, as dull as his story was, gave us the idea of a socially awkward guy who had to work to achieve his ambitions and goals and felt torn up over his father's opinions and ran to the ghost of his father for approval. Like, I loved the scene where while he's walking around Dyer Island, he sees the ghost of his father and runs to him, wanting to embrace his father, ask for his father's advice, tell his father all that he's accomplished, only for his father to turn away in disappointment. That establishes a deep connection between Felix and his father, a desire for Felix to connect more with his father. That's something. That's at least something. We have something of a character there. But in this, Elodie's parents don't seem to have any relevance to her outside of the fact that they were kidnapped. It's not that the lore is bad, it's that it's dull. If you want me to care about Elodie Rakoto and her plight, then give me something about her and her parents to latch onto. Something that they left behind, some connection that drives her. Why was she the one to keep searching when the other pariahs quit? How did she get in contact with the Collector? Who are the Dark Veil cult? This lore feels like a setup for the Collector's lore himself, rather than the guy who we get tomes from, it's kind of a shame. I don't know. I was hoping for something more interesting than just Felix 2.0, now with even less character. But it's what we got, and honestly, I was not impressed. I wish it were better. I wish it were more in-depth. I wish we understood Elodie as a person, rather than just as a Lara Croft wannabe. Like, we don't see what kind of adventure she goes on. We don't get to it. Like, what did she learn? How did she train? What kind of things did she focus on? Did she ever go to Madagascar? What was the connection with her family? Like, I don't know. What was her connection to Felix? Maybe you could tie them together a little bit more. I don't know. Unfortunately, her perks aren't exactly fantastic either. Elodie uses Appraisal, Deception, and Power Struggle. And these perks are okay. Appraisal is a perk associated with chests. You start the trial with 3 tokens on this perk, and when a chest has already been opened, you can consume 1 token to rummage through it and get an item, and you rummage through the chest 80% faster than usual. This perk is fine. It's nice to have in the instance that you need a fresh new item. Problem is you don't know what you'll get, so it's kind of a luck of the draw. It's not all that great, honestly. Deception is a little better if you're sprinting and you interact with a locker. The following effects take place. You don't get into the locker as you normally would. The doors will open and close fast, giving the appearance that you've entered, and the locker creates a loud noise notification for the killer, again making the illusion that the survivor entered it. Your scratch marks and pools of blood are also hidden for 3 seconds. Then the perk cools down for 40 seconds. This perk is actually pretty cool for throwing off killers in the chase and buying some time to get away, but it does depend on the killer losing sight of you before you use the perk, so it's situational most of the time. Not bad, just it's situational. And then Power Struggle. It was meant to be a second decisive strike, but honestly, it's fundamentally useless. In all my attempts to make this work, it doesn't work. When you are put in the dying state, you see the auras of all pallets. When you are carried by the killer and your wiggle progress reaches 15%, if the killer walks through a pallet or near one, you can drop the pallet and stun the killer to get away. Okay, let me explain why this perk doesn't work. First, it assumes that you will manage to reach a 15% wiggle progression before the killer gets to a hook. Second, it assumes that the killer will walk through a pallet or near one to get to a hook, when that may not be the case. And third, Decisive Strike exists. To be perfectly honest, it's not a bad perk necessarily. It'll work out for you once in a blue moon, I suppose. But it's really not worth carrying when there are so many better perks to run, because here's the thing, this perk will only work for you if the situation allows for it, where 1, you get at least 50% wiggle progression, and 2, the killer walks close enough to a pallet for you to flip it over on him. Those two scenarios have to be met for this to be useful, unlike Decisive Strike, where the only situation that has to be met is that you just got off the hook and the killer downs you again. That's a little bit more of a good situation to be in. I don't know. I don't want to be mean on Elodie Rakoto. I really don't want to be mean on her because she's not bad. Her design is actually pretty neat. And I did kind of want to explore more of this idea of who the pariahs were, so I'm not against that either. But Elodie has nothing to her outside of her connection to Felix Richter. There's no character here. There is a playable avatar. There is an avatar with a backstory, but there's not a character. Who is Elodie Rakoto? What pushes her? What drives her? What does she like? What does she dislike? Yes, she wants to discover what happened to her parents. Why does she care? What connection did she have to her parents? Did she like her father more than her mother? What kind of mother was they? What kind of father was he? Like, I want to know more about who she is rather than just what she does. Now, you may say, Raven, you're being too nitpicky. I don't know. I feel like some of these characters did a much better job of telling us who these people were rather than just what they do. And I feel like we could have done the same thing with Elodie Rakoto. I would have liked to have seen that. Anyway, next up is the killer, the twins, and oh my lord, I'm not looking forward to this. This will take some time, but that's for next time in the fog. Take care.